I've waited 15 years for this game. Go ahead and edit this part out, future me. I'm gonna be dancing for a while. Woo! Am I overreacting? No, I'm not. Woo! Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, is a long anticipated game for us Crash fans. But before I get into the game, my thoughts on it, and boy are they good thoughts, I think I need to lay out Crash Bandicoot's history so you can understand why this game is such a big deal for us fans. The first Crash game was released in 1996 for the PlayStation 1, and it made a huge splash. See, at the time, Mario was the top of platforming, but the downside to that was, well, Nintendo. Nintendo would rather do a harakiri than let their games even glance at other consoles. But that's very obvious, right? It's very common knowledge. Why would Nintendo release Mario games on consoles that isn't a Nintendo console? I'm not saying this is a bad thing. Exclusivity breeds innovation from other companies to live up to what Nintendo was doing, to get more of their audience to come to their side. I stuttered a lot there. But this left other consoles without a platforming mascot, and in came Crash Bandicoot like a knight to vanquish the evil known as boredom. With the first Crash game being a huge success, there was of course a sequel that came out just a year later, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. This game was bigger and better in every way, adding in a ton of new themes and moves to Crash. Overall, it was enhanced in every way from the first game. And yet again, this further put Crash into the spotlight as the new platforming mascot that could rival people like Mario, you know what I mean? Nintendo had Mario, Sega had Sonic, and now Sony had their own mute, insane, crazy Australian marsupial to battle against them. And the success would continue more with the third game, Crash Warped, coming out the following year. That is 3 Crash games in 3 years, all improving on each other. And the third game yet again added tons of new features, like unlockable abilities and a time warping story. But at the time, people were starting to feel like the same formula was getting a little stale. But I'm sure things would have gotten much more spicy if Naughty Dog kept making the games. That's right, the same Naughty Dog that makes games about really sad, angry, buff people used to make family-friendly platforming games. But even though Crash's daddy was no longer in the picture, Sony wasn't gonna let their poster boy fade into obscurity. So along came Traveler's Tale to make Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex, and it was a bad game. This was the camel that broke Crash Bandicoot's back, because the formula was already a little stale. Remember, this was 3 years in a row of 3 different Crash games, all having the same standard gameplay formula. And this just did the same as Warp did, but way worse. It kinda showed how much actual love there was needed for a Crash game. I didn't mention this part, but a lot of Crash Bandicoot spin-off games came out in this timeline I laid out, like Crash Bash, which is like their own version of Mario Party, Crash Team Racing, which was their own version of Mario Kart, except better honestly, and the Game Boy games like The Huge Adventure, which is actually pretty decent games. So Crash wasn't just a trilogy at this time. Crash would live on even after the abomination of Wrath of Cortex, however. This wasn't the end of him. He was too big at the time to just let him die. So they were not going to give up on Crash. They were not going to give up on our favorite 90s mascot, you know what I mean? So along came Twinsanity, and it was unfinished. Boy, was it unfinished. But at least they listened to fans. It ditched the standard gameplay we were really common with for a more open world approach. This had a mixed reaction at the time. Some really hated it, but overall it's kind of gained the love of fans throughout the years. Not a bad game, just very glitchy and very unfinished. After this, Crash would just jump ship entirely. A few years later, coming out with Crash of the Titans, where Crash looked like this, and I hate it. This was a beat-em-up game that played nothing at all like the games we knew and loved. And so, what do you do when you make Crash look like a man named Keith, and everyone hates it? So what do they do at this point? You make a sequel to it, of course, except, the only good thing is the cutscenes. This was the last Crash game for so long. Yes, after this, we would not hear from the marsupial for 7 years, not counting Skylanders. But eventually, we did get the remakes of the original trilogy, and people realized, wow, these games are actually good. Then we got the remake of CTR, and people realized, wow, these games are actually good. Can we please get a new game? Then we did, and I just beat it and wanted to make a video on it, so here we are, and welcome. After so many years, and after I just explained a really brief history, you probably can start to realize while a new game with this old formula finally coming out is such a big deal for us fans. We have not had a good Crash Bandicoot game since 1998. Not saying all the games were bad. Twinsanity has its charm. A few of the spin-offs are pretty decent. But overall, we needed this. And Crash Bandicoot 4, it's fantastic. It is exactly what we needed from the series. And it's great. From the opening seconds, I was squealing with nostalgia overload when I seen the Insanity Island beach again. See, my history with Crash Bandicoot is, they were probably the first games I ever played. Growing up, I played the crap out of them on our PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2. My dad had the games because he liked them. And of course, I played the ever-living crap out of them as a kid. And you know, I stuck with Crash through the years. Whenever I seen one of his games on the shelf, I would pick it up because I just loved Crash. And Crash 4 shows that that they loved it. They loved Crash. You can tell by every ounce of the game. You can tell how much love was poured into this project. Crash takes the love of the fans and handles it like a long-lost lover, baby. It takes the formula established in the original trilogy and elevates it to an extreme level. This game feels like a Crash game at its core, and it adds so much to make it way more modern. There are a lot of aspects added to this game to make this a reality, like new gameplay mechanics all over the place, and even more playable characters. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. I want to discuss every aspect of this game, and so you can see why it's so incredible, and make you want to buy it, because as many people as possible need to play this game because it's very good. Let's start off with the story. And unsurprisingly, it's very simple. Also, no spoilers, don't worry. What I'll be talking about with the story is from the first 10 minutes of the game, okay? The story takes place after Crash 3. That's right, it ignores all the other games that came out after the original trilogy. We open on Neo Cortex and Entropy, still trapped in another dimension from the end of Crash 3. Eventually, Uka Uka manages to open a dimensional rift, but falls shortly afterwards. Now the evil duo can escape and try to conquer all of space and time. Aku Aku starts to feel a weird energy afoot. Then he warns Crash to go take a look, and Crash does it of course because he's our hero boy. I missed you so much. After a start out stage that is fantastic, we discover that one of the ancient masks has been awakened by a change in the space-time continuum. Now Crash and his sister Coco must travel through dimensions and time to reclaim the 4 ancient masks to stop the evil duo from their conquest over the entire universe. I love how they handled the story. Ignoring the other games was basically the only way to go. Making it where people who only played the remakes, the trilogy that was released on the PS4, they can jump into the story knowing exactly where they are and exactly what happened in the past, rather than having to worry about this abomination. Why do you have tattoos? Twinsanity did have its moments that I think will be missed by the fans, like these ones.
Well, the past few years have kind of been slow. Wrath of Cortex didn't do as well as we'd hoped, and... Fish?
But back to Crash 4. There are more cutscenes in the game than all the other games. The previous games really relied on just talking from floating heads. But this game takes a new hands-on approach and makes it feel much more like a long, adventurous journey. Overall, it's fantastic. Now let's talk about the graphics. And see, some of the fans made it very obvious that they hated Crash's redesign. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I freaking love it, dude. Crash looks absolutely incredible in my eyes. This cartoony, super expressive style works absolutely perfectly for Crash's design. He is supposed to be an overreactive, insane person, so this style works absolutely perfect. And Coco looks just as good, if not better to me. The overall design and art style is just incredible. I don't see why people don't really like it. The overall design and art style I really like. The environments are huge and fantastically detailed. Seriously, when the T-Rex was chasing me in this level, look back at the love and detail put into every movement it makes. And you won't even be noticing it when you're playing the game, because your eyes will be focused down here. The pirate stage looks super detailed with crazy stuff thrown everywhere. Look at the Asian stage, the detailed city. This game has so much love put into it. Look at this crap, dude. It's breathtaking sometimes. Everything, man. Look at Tawna. Tawna's new design is incredible. She looks like a crazy, adventurous journeyman, and that's what she's supposed to be, so it works perfectly fine for her in this game. Honestly, which one of these two characters do you think has a better design? Now, Cortex is different. He looks like an actual mix of his classic design and his Crash of the Titans design. Now, we don't talk about Crash of the Titans, but overall, I think his redesign is also really well. It looks more modern and he looks great. He fits in with the rest of the cast better with this design. Then we have my husband, known as Dingodile. This boy, thick. I wouldn't have it any other way. Overall, graphics, art style, design, 10 out of 10. Fantastic. But I also liked the Dragon's Dogma anime, so take my word with how you will. Now let's talk about the main thing of any game. The gameplay. Like I had mentioned earlier, Crash 4 takes the gameplay style from the original trilogy, but sparks a lot of new life into it. Now, people already felt that this gameplay style was already being picked pretty clean from the original trilogy, and Wrath of Cortex seen this, and promptly decided to flail the corpse around like a limp puppet, redoing everything but worse. But somehow, Crash 4 doesn't do that, instead reanimating it and showing that this style is far from dry. It shows with the right team and the right amount of love, this gameplay style is far from dull. See, the Crash Bandicoot style of gameplay is wholly unique. There is not really much like it, or exactly like it. It didn't spawn a marathon of rip-offs like other franchises did. The only notable games that use this style is Donald Duck Going Quackers and Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase. I could mention the Lilo and Stitch game, but who even knows that exists? I bet you didn't. Yeah, these are the most popular of the Crash-inspired games. This style is a corridor linear 3D platformer where you progress through a stage by moving forward and doing a host of platforming challenges. And the perspective will constantly change as well into a 2D platformer or a runaway sequence in some points. It also relies heavily on crate breaking. They use this as not only a fun way to just get collectibles, but also a platforming mechanic, causing you to have really quick reactions because your platforms are one-time use only. But Crash 4 also adds so much more to make this feel so much different than the other games. It doesn't just rehash what the previous games did. The big new claim to fame is the mask system. Like I mentioned, there are 4 masks you get throughout the story mode. As you progress through the game, you will unlock these masks, and they can be used in specific stages at specific areas. Think of them as power-ups that can only be used at certain times. And these are exactly what this formula needed. A new exciting things to do to make the platforming more engaging once you feel like you've been doing the same thing for quite a while. There are 4 masks in total. I've said that 6 times now. Each of these masks have a very distinct ability. One slows down time, another flips gravity. Then you get to the 2 more unique masks. Another one gives you a super spin where you can do a mega jump and glide, even deflecting certain colored attacks from enemies. And then, probably the most unique one in the bunch, is one that will flip between 2 different dimensions, which will make certain platforms or obstacles appear and disappear. This makes the gameplay feel crazy alive, dude. My favorites probably being the dimensional shift one and the one that slows down time. The others are fantastic too. I was squeeing in happiness whenever I got any of the masks. I was writhing with anticipation to see what the game was going to throw at me next with these masks. The last few levels of the game throw masks at you in between platforms or even in mid-air, mid-like platforming. They use that to get through some of the challenges in the later game, and they really put your skill to the test. The last 2 levels before the boss, oh my gosh, dude. Oh my gosh. And boy, is this game difficult. See, Crash is already pretty famous nowadays for being a harder platformer than something like Mario. But oh my gosh, Crash 4 is insanely difficult at some points. Most of the time, it's kind of a mediocre ride. Not easy, not hard, you just kind of go with the flow. Then you'll hit a roadblock, dude, and it gets very difficult, homie. Why did I say homie? I've said that like 4 times in my entire life. I'm tired. In the end, the masks are an incredible idea to give the game so much more life, but that's not all. They also added rail sections that give the gameplay just more variety, and there are the Crash famous vehicle sections, or well, I call them vehicles. They're more like animal kidnapping and scarring them for life, but yeah, and that still isn't it. There are 4 different playstyles in total in this game. This means there are 5 playable characters. 2 of them are Crash and Coco, who you will be playing most of the time. They play identically from one another, and you can switch between them at any time on the map. They are the classic style we all know and love. Run, jump, spin, slide, all the goodness we remember. But the other 3 gameplay styles are all great as well. First is Tawna. Plays very similar to Crash and Coco, but she feels a little heavier and also gets a few unique things, mainly her grappling hook, which can be used to attack enemies, break crates, or and of course grapple to certain points and pull yourself there. She really feels like a seasoned adventurer compared to the standard characters, which is what they were going for, so I loved it. Then there is my husband. Now if Crash and Coco are a car and Tawna is a truck, Dingodile is a PF Chang's with spider legs. This boy is heavy, not even having a double jump. But our boy has something up his sleeves, the Poltergust. I mean this thing. It doesn't have a name, it's a vacuum, okay? You can use this to hover and even get a quick boost after your hover. So he has some mobility. You can use it to suck up crates or even grab TNT and shoot it out like a bullet. It's super fun and super unique for this game. With very unique level designs with tons of crates to suck up with that satisfying effect and that sound, dude. It's so fun. Now the last character, Cortex. Yeah, you can play Cortex in something that isn't Twinsanity, or Crash Bash, or the racing games. Okay, this is not the only time you get to play as Cortex. Cortex, again, doesn't have a double jump like all the other characters, replacing it with a super dash. But this isn't his huge gameplay change. He has a GAT, which he can use to shoot enemies, turning them into a platform, or shoot them again to turn them into a bouncy pad. His levels felt like mazes a lot of the time, with tons of 2D. Out of all the gameplay styles, Cortex is probably my least favorite. Not bad, it's still good, it's still a lot of fun, very different, it makes you think differently, but he's just not as fun as the other characters to me. But overall, the gameplay is just incredible. Overall, the gameplay is the best in the franchise possibly for me, dude. It's so fast-paced and so fun. I love the gameplay so much in this game. But okay, now that we're getting towards the end of my evaluation of Crash 4, let's talk about the extras. What else this game has to offer for you other than just fantastic gameplay, incredible design, a pretty good story, you know, everything else that makes games incredible. I love this game. Crash 4 is almost overflowing with content, man. Once you've beaten the game, you are far from done. Crash and Coco have a ton of skins to unlock each. They can be unlocked by gaining a certain amount of gems in each stage, with each gem being locked behind a certain feat, and these are all incredible. Biker Crash, Unicorn Coco, Classic Crash, Hipster Coco, Classic Coco, even then when they're beat up. But that isn't it. Each level also has an inverted version of the stage, where once you've beaten it for the first time, you can play through it again with small changes or just a filter over it. Each of these also having unique gems to get, so this basically makes each stage have 2 stages in them. Then there are the flashback tapes, which are unique levels that are basically short bonus stages. They can be unlocked by reaching a certain point of the stage without dying. They also flesh out backstory from before the first game when he was still an experiment of Dr. Forehead. And there is still even more bang for your buck. Each stage also has time trials, where you can try to unlock relics by beating the stage in a certain time. Let's just say there is enough content to keep you busy for a very long time. Each stage is so fun to memorize, it is part of the experience with this game. Also, if you go through a stage, get every single gem, and don't die in it, you can get a perfect relic. It is basically the completionist's goal. The Easter eggs are so fun too. This abomination, Spyro everywhere. Can we please get a new Spyro game while we're at it? Thank you. Again, I could talk about every aspect of Crash 4 all day long, but let's wrap it up. In total, I freaking love this game. It is incredible. Absolutely incredible. Knocked me back to my childhood and made me feel so happy for every second I was playing it. There is a few small issues, mainly in the bonus stages where you play other characters. You go through their stage, then you have to play all through a Crash or Coco stage again, except harder. It felt a little repetitive. That part was a little annoying. And of course, the difficulty spike. There are some difficulty spikes in the game that feel kind of absurd, especially the last 2 levels before the last boss. You know, it's just so hard. At that point, it is unbelievably difficult. People have complained about it online a lot. So those last 2 stages before the boss, just be ready to rip your freaking hair out, dude. It's hard. But in the end, this game is a 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. I don't give perfect scores very often, very rarely. And I don't usually score games in general. And honestly, it's probably more of a 9 out of 10. But for me, it is a 10 out of 10. Everything I wanted from the franchise. I freaking love this game. And yeah, thank you, Toys for Bob. Anyway, thanks guys. See ya. I'm gonna go relive my childhood some more with a few more rounds with my favorite boy. That sounded very weird, actually. I'm sorry.